Dear friends in Jesus, in a day or two, we'll be beginning the most important 3 days of our Christian faith, life, theology, and liturgy. The 3 days called Triduum, the sacred Triduum or the Easter Triduum, meaning 3 days together, are one event, if you want to look at it in such a way. It is those 3 days of Jesus' last days on earth. We know that. Now, these 3 days are most important because they lead us to that Easter Sunday. That Easter Sunday, which is a Christian Passover forever from the time of Jesus' resurrection thousands of years ago. Now, even before any feast could come, Christmas or any other feast, the first major day that our brothers and sisters in Jerusalem, especially in Jerusalem, right, where the action was, the one day that was already gaining significance was Sunday, the day after the Sabbath. And therefore, Sunday, even before the Council of Nicaea could standardize Christian faith, even before that, Sunday became a great day, the first day of the week, because the scriptures say so, the first day of the week, or the 8th day, the Lord's Day. Sunday became already a very profound celebration because it was important, because Christ rose from the dead. As this was in the back of their mind of people in Jerusalem, they knew that somehow the Jewish Passover was also very strong. And therefore, in their minds, if there is a Jewish Passover, then there is a Christian Passover, and the Christian Passover is Sunday. Sunday is a Christian Passover, the Christian Pasch, in which we celebrate his meal with his disciples, his arrest, his suffering, his death, and his resurrection, and the mission to his disciples to go and proclaim. All those were already part of the Sunday liturgy at that time, And therefore, the Jewish Passover and now the Christian Passover. When this consciousness of emerged, Sunday being important already, the Jewish Passover, therefore a Christian Passover, the two traditions emerged. One celebrated the Christian Passover exactly on the same day of Jewish Passover, which was on the 14th day of the month of Nisan on the lunar calendar. Another celebrated on the Sunday following the 14th day of Nisan of the lunar calendar. This was going on, but when things changed from the lunar calendar to the solar calendar, they didn't know how to calculate, and therefore the Christian Passover, the Christian Pasch, Easter, was began to fix on a day in the solar calendar after the first full moon, after the spring equinox. The spring equinox generally means equal day, equal night. That's how, in simple terms. And so the first Sunday, after the first full moon, after the spring equinox, will be the Easter Sunday. And therefore that got its own terms. And that is why Easter Sunday could be anywhere between March 21st and April 25th. The spring equinox happens that time, the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox. Now, once that Easter day was fixed, there's always an expectation for the Christian Passover, the Christian Pasch. Many developments came through. Many developments came through from Jerusalem, from Rome, from Egypt. And all these took different dimensions. But somehow, the day before the Easter has to be a Easter fast. So Easter fasting began. And then that was extended to the Lenten fast and all that. We covered it, or I'll cover it again later sometime. And then Easter has to be followed by Easter celebration, the 50 days of Pentecost. We'll talk about it later. But somehow Easter day itself was taken a prominence. But as it was happening, there were people who are being baptized on Easter Sunday. Okay, now these people have to be prepared, the new catechumens. And therefore the Thursday after the Wednesday, just before the Easter Sunday, was an important day for people to come back to church, to make the forgiveness of sins, to be confessing their sins. That was on Holy Thursday. Not yet called Holy Thursday, but Big Thursday if you want to call. That emerged, and slowly it came to a point where they said there is a Mass or a liturgy on Thursday morning, which will end the Lenten fast. And whatever happens after that begins those days to prepare for Easter. And that is how Holy Thursday began. And then things began to move on, and there came a point of time. There were 3 Masses or 3 liturgies on Holy Thursday. The first one was for the penitents to come back to the church. The second was to bless the chrism, the oil, by the Pope and the Bishop of local ordinary. And then the commemoration of the Lord's Supper with his disciples. And then all of them were put together. And in 1955, as recently as this, the whole thing was standardized into a Triduum. And again, it was refined in 1970 as we have it today. And therefore, when you come on a Holy Thursday, my dear friends, you're beginning that journey of celebrating Jesus' entry into his own Paschal feast with his disciples. Those 3 festivals, institution of priesthood, beginning of the Eucharist, and the celebration of love. Okay, we know that. But then in the life of Jesus, it is the Last Supper that began. Already Easter Sunday was celebrated. But how did the Triduum come about? That calls a little nuance. Just as much the people in Jerusalem were so much on awe of the Sunday, they also were very much awe and sad about every Friday. And especially when you have the Sundays, and then the Easter Pasch, the Christian Pasch came in, then the Friday before that Easter Sunday is very important. And therefore on that day, the Bishop of Jerusalem, if you go to the Holy Land, you will find, he will lead a procession from the Mount of Olives, and he will come down to the Garden of Gethsemane. You can still find those places there in the Holy Land. Then on Saturday morning, the same bishop will again begin from the pillar of scourging, the cenacle, and again lead a group to Golgotha near the Holy Sepulchre, and there he will have a cross for veneration of the faithful. That came true. So that was in one period. Holy Thursday already from 3 Masses to 1. Good Friday had processions like this going on. Triduum 1, Holy Thursday. Triduum 2nd day, Good Friday. The whole thing, what I said just now. And then the Holy Saturday. There was a time when they wanted to make a big celebration of Holy Saturday. But then looking at the scriptures, that's a time when Jesus was buried in Golgotha, near Golgotha, in the cave, very close by. And therefore, that is a time of peaceful expectation. When Jesus is resting, but active to go down to the powers of hell, conquer the powers of darkness, open the gates of heaven. And therefore, as this was going on, they said, how we will bring forth a new liturgy for that vigil. And that is how Easter vigil begins, which has its own development, which I will talk about later. And therefore, from a Triduum point of view, Holy Thursday to Good Friday to Easter vigil, these three become one unit of Jesus' Paschal celebration, which is actually celebrated fully on Easter Sunday. And therefore, there was a time when they wanted to celebrate the Easter vigil till Easter Sunday morning and end by dawn. And then it was felt, no, Easter vigil has its own power. And therefore, Easter vigil ends the Easter Triduum. Easter Sunday begins the 50 days of celebration, the Easter octave, and the 50 days of celebration ends with Pentecost. And therefore, my dear friends, I just traced for you the Easter Triduum. Go to the Easter Triduum. Don't miss it for anything. Every other feast and celebration, you can put off your church feast, your church novena, your saint feast, and all that is all secondary. I'm telling you openly. These 3 days are crucial. Go for the Thursday, and then at the end of it, they will repose the sacrament. It is like waiting for Jesus in Garden Gethsemane. But don't do adoration the whole night. It's only till midnight. It's very important to do that. Let's not extend it beyond, because then Jesus' own ministry of his death happens on Friday and on Saturday vigil, if you can. And therefore, make these 3 days the most important part of your theology and faith. Celebrate it, but with Jesus in mind. Some of you in some parts of the world, some of our priest brothers preach long sermons on a Good Friday when there is a huge reading. As they preach for a long time, if you're not able to follow it, that's okay. That's okay. Because I would recommend a short sermon on Good Friday, but keep the focus on that development of Jesus' supper, death, and resurrection at vigil. And therefore, keep all this together. Keep the Triduum. In a day or two, I'll come back to talk about the Easter Vigil and then the Easter Sunday. Enjoy your Triduum. Enjoy those 3 days. Make it part of your journey with Jesus. If the service gets longer, make it an internal movement. Maybe just surround yourself in the thought that knowing you are traveling with Jesus, you are reliving those 3 days of Christ. His supper, his arrest, his agony in the garden, his death, and his resurrection. And I'll come back in a day about the Easter Vigil and Easter itself. Thank you and God bless. Keep in mind, he is the Pasch. We are celebrating the Christian Passover. How wonderful that is. Blessings. Easter Triduum. That's what you need to be.